I think right now the natural progression of things is we don't know what we're doing, and I really like to emulate people who don't know what they're doing, and that way once you get there, you can go on the basis that, hey kid out there listening, if we ever get one kid who doesn't know what he's doing or doesn't, and she doesn't know what she's doing, to raise her hand over here at Archway and say, how do you do that? And we tell her, well, we don't know everything about everything, but just by guess and test, right? That seemed to be the...
And I know you probably get tired of me saying this, but Seinfeld made millions off that. The show about nothing.
Yeah, that's so true.
He made millions off of it.
Yeah, but it was very well put together that they always had something that came out of it. And it's very easy to keep people's attention when you're either making them laugh or making them cry.
I guess, depending on, the mood they're in. Because when you're coming to study, you're really not coming to laugh or cry, you're coming to learn. So we can kind of mix all that in there. We want to make them laugh, cry, and learn. How about that?
Yeah, I think the most effective teacher in my life, so I guess we've jumped in, so I'm Michele Peterson. We're into the box.
Into the box.
I'm Michele Peterson. I am an entrepreneur here in town that hopefully through the purchase of Archway and running some marketing workshops, I can begin to get kids who are in the neighborhood and possibly go to and zone for Brainerd High School to understand that when they put other people's brand and label on their clothing or on themselves, that at that point they believe that they're saying something to the people around them about their class, yet everybody who understands class and certainly economic class understands that even if a kid goes out and spends $500 on something, that once they put it on there and they enter a school that is 98 to 99% free lunch, that we know they're poor based on what school they go to, versus if a parent behaves in such a way and sends their kid to GPS or Baylor or Macaulay or even Arts and Sciences or Chattanooga School for the Arts, Chattanooga Christian School, based on certain vernaculars or an educational level, that's the equalizer. The person in the school can't tell whether or not this person belongs to a certain class or not based on their communication skills and their ability then to put on someone else's brand that makes them think that it's making them feel better about themselves, when indeed what's going to make them feel better about themselves is actually creating something of their own.
I actually experienced something like that. When I was in 10th grade, I went to Hickson High School. It was a program called the Minority Majority. And I flunked out because it was a culture shock for me, because I had come from a circle that was majority black to a circle that was majority white. And I guess I just never could get the grasp, because I couldn't get school and the grading because of that. Well, following year, Howard went into their uniform program, to where it was the white shirts, khaki pants or skirts, and then the burgundy or maroon ties. It's funny that you say about the branding and stuff, because even though we were in uniform, and you could still tell the kids that were well-to-do or had more money or emphasis on their clothing than the kids that could just afford the uniform. And so, to where you had the kids with the khaki Dockers, you had the other kid with probably the Dickies. To where you had the kid with probably...
Yeah, name brand.
Exactly. To where you had the Pro Wing shoes, you had the other kid with the Jordans. To where you had the, say, Goodies department store necktie, you had the Christian Dior or some of the other name brand neckties or whatever. So you could still tell, even though it was uniform, the difference in the statuses of who was the kid that represented material versus who was the kid that was just getting by. Even kids that showed up that didn't have ties, they would cut ribbons to give them that burgundy tie around the neck or whatever. Yeah. And so it's interesting, because they didn't have a mandatory store to where we all shop from this store to get this particular uniform like GPS does. People were still able to go to your JCPenney's, your Goodies, your Gap, or wherever to get their uniform, as long as it met those colors that were set forth.
But it's amazing how, so I grew up and went to a Catholic grade school, middle school, and we had dress code the entire time, kindergarten through 8th grade. And for a period of that time, we had a school store, so everyone was buying the exact same thing. But it was fascinating, even as a kid, how fast you could still pick up and separate because of simple things like the hand-me-down, right? Everyone, you could pick it out from a mile away as a kid.
Like, or maybe your mother used wool light and mine used Tide, and she dried her clothes extra long, so my clothes faded a little bit, while yours remained pristine, or she bought you new whenever yours started to show any kind of signs of wear on it, so you still had that status.
Yeah, and then the minute it went to just matching colors for the uniform, then it was like complete matching segregation, right? Like, oh, here we go. Again, you have the Dockers. You have, brand X that no one's ever heard of. It's crazy.
So let me jump in here because I introduced myself as Michele Peterson, an entrepreneur who bought some property over on Glass Street. Please, we've jumped into our discussion, but we want to assume that from this point forward, at least 20 to maybe 50 recordings, we probably need to reintroduce ourselves in case someone listens out there who doesn't habitually listen and they just find us on episode 48 of Frankly Speaking. So Carlos talking about, what was the program in Hickson called?
The Minority Majority Program. It was tasked to bring kids from the inner city to some of your more rural schools or outboard schools or whatever, to get them out of the inner city schools.
So introduce yourself, like you're from East Chattanooga.
Carlos Hampton from East Chattanooga. I'm a professional firefighter for the city. Somewhat of a small business entrepreneur on the more novice scale, not as experienced as my counterparts, but learning on the AP program, I guess, of entrepreneurship.
That gives a lot of credit to this table. I don't know. A lot of pressure there, Andy. Tell us about yourself, Andy.
All right, so I'm Andy Sweet, and I did not grow up in Tennessee. Born and raised in central Illinois in the cornfields, but ended up making this my home. And more than anything, I like to think of myself as kind of jack of all trades, right? I like to learn.
Yeah.
I like to learn. I like to talk. And so what a better place than a podcast?
Yeah, so I think...
And ultimately, if you are listening on whatever episode you're on, follow our channel.
Please.
Oh, if they don't hit Frankly Speaking on YouTube, and then I'm not sure I know the difference between the platform YouTube and Vimeo, but certainly I think where this is headed for us is trying to find a platform in Chattanooga that already has an audience listening in a more micro environment, because YouTube seems to be so vast.
Yes.
And I think Vimeo is more professionally oriented in the artistic thing. It would be nice for somebody who may or may not catch this as I promote it and post it on Facebook and try to figure out if the Times Free Press could let me pay them for this podcast to go out through their platform or whatnot, to try to get something going here where what we're doing over here is to try to bring awareness to a murky pond, as we established the last time. One of the things that really bugged me, and I think still bugs me, is when people talk about generational poverty, and certainly in Chattanooga, generational poverty can be very deceptively color-oriented, where you can say that a lot of the poorest communities in and around Chattanooga are primarily black. Would that?
Hispanic.
Or Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And so one could say, as an entrepreneur, in looking at that, that's opportunity, right? Because really, if you're an entrepreneur in training or even in working, you're looking for opportunity for really your problem solver. So this is a natural fit for me as I watched kids begin to really kill kids. And then you realize, I think there was something like 800 people got shot outside of Chicago over Memorial Day weekend this year.
I didn't hear that.
Crazy
Yeah,
num-
it was
crazy
a
big
crazy number.
Really?
And you really think that maybe what happened in Chicago, because they were such a prolific equalizer when it came to civil rights, and a lot of the things that happened in Chicago with formulation of thought is that it became really a daunting task, so people just decided not to try because there was no way to measure their success. Because I think it was somebody who said this weekend, I heard this at an event for mark making, which I try to be a supporter of from an arts perspective. Francis McDonald's father, Jack McDonald, was there. He's getting older, obviously, and one of the guys at the introduction of him said he's a man that plants a tree that will forevermore possibly shade people, but he will never get to see that shade. And
deep.
I think that is relevant to what we're doing here when it comes to trying to get kids who go primarily to schools that are failing, certainly failing a community of thought from the perspective of how do they create marketplaces that are sustainable for them without leaving. Because I think that's still at the Glass House Collective, I think that's her mantra, is how to uplift this community in East Chattanooga without displacing the people that are here. Because most of the people that are here, one can either argue are either first-time home buyers or on some sort of federal subsidy, or are trying to look for some sort of financial opportunity without exploitation, which tends to be what happens when you get Section 8 happening in such a concentrated community that there's no ownership. And property ownership has been proven time and time again that it brings with it so much responsibility. And so when I pay an ungodly amount of property taxes for all the properties that I own in Hamilton County, and I look at the percentage of that go to a school system that is failing, it feels like a failure to me.
Yeah, throwing money at something that doesn't work.
It feels like my failure at that point. I just don't absently write that property check. I take it very seriously that when reports come out that say schools, and like what we listened to last night, schools in Hamilton County are worse than...
What did we listen to last night?
Well, we went to, Carlos and I, unbeknownst, we showed up. I didn't know you were going to be there. We went to Tiffany Robinson's, I don't know what you would call that, just an invitation.
It's called a meet and greet. Officially
a meet and
on
greet.
Facebook, it was labeled as a meet and greet, where Tiffany Robinson pretty much, I guess, exposed herself to the people that were there as to what she was running for and what her goals were, and what her, I guess, interests were, and compassion with the Hamilton County school system. Very interesting young lady, very driven, and I think she's very, very driven. And for me to say that about someone running for office gives a lot of credit, because I'm usually skeptical about people that tend to have to run for their position. But she seems to be very genuine in her efforts and things that she talked about yesterday, so to speak.
Well, what's so funny about me, because again, I try to not, in fact, I was just on a phone call on the way here, and the guy was like, I just admire you. You've been able to walk through Chattanooga and nobody's been able to pigeonhole you to one thing or the other. I don't even know where you came from and how did you wind up here. And I said, Jack, the best thing about that is that I didn't make my money in Chattanooga. I went to other communities. I became those communities. And I think that's the fascinating thing about what we talk about here, is that a lot of people leave. I mean, a lot of white people have left East Chattanooga. And then inherently you can almost predict that that's going to happen to the black people as well that are here. if they're going out and looking for opportunity that isn't next door to them. And it seems like people don't do things in inches when they make their decision to leave. It seems like they do it in yards. And so when people leave, it seems like they go as far away as possible from where they were, that has, inherently some devaluation to their character or what they thought of themselves at that time. And they try to get away from it versus staying where they are and changing the circumstance, because it must be difficult to be uneducated as a parent and then trying to educate your child at the same time and trying to keep control of them. I think that's probably...
And to question that whole path of stay or leave, right? When it's just you, that's not as difficult of a decision. You have a family, then you've got to really question that stay or leave mentality. And I think, mentioning that they go far rather than close, I mean, there's a lot of history in that, right? People have always, if you're going to make a change, you're always thinking you've got to make the biggest change to make the biggest, effect on whatever negative situation you're in, whether that was original immigration or even current immigration and beyond, right? It's happens city to city too. You say, well, if I'm already feeling controlled or oppressed or pigeonholed, or I can't even find work here, then I certainly don't want to try across the street. I want to try across the country.
Yeah, isn't that weird? It seems like people go geographically to escape whatever opportunity, but mainly I think people really go when they're very fearful, because it seems like that geographical change gives them hope. And so you see in that hope much more of a transient opportunity, whereas I see so much opportunity over here in East Chattanooga. I look around at the infrastructure and all the things around here, and if we could just have some diversity of thought, then maybe that diversity of thought leads to an inherent good. But if that good is based on a bigger margin than what is capable, so let's say over here the kids may need more latitude because society is basically saying now the equalizer is that all the money being spent on these kids is the same amount of money or the highest amount of money being spent, and money makes the difference. But what we're also seeing in our schools here at Hamilton County is that money isn't making the difference. And I think that's because there's a disconnect with the marketplace. And when I see kids that I've mentored take their hard-earned money and go buy things that they think are going to make themselves feel better, and then they don't feed themselves instead of buying that and putting that label on their back, that for me means that whoever is doing that ad or whoever is doing that promotion of that product placement is really, really tuned into the devaluation of people who have virtually nothing.
What do you think about the analogy that I posted the other day on Facebook about the caged animals that don't know that they're free if you pull them outside the cage?
Well, I think that's very relevant. I did read that, and I think it's very relevant in terms of the fact that most people have no clue what is right there in front of them when they are so devalued. And then in that devaluation of themselves, they'll just about do anything to protect who they love. So it didn't matter what kid I was, whether they were white or black or male or female, right? I've mentored about 12 kids. And it didn't matter what color or gender they were. All 12 of them wanted to buy their mother a house and protect their mother, even though their mother wasn't the greatest mother to them. In fact, I would say that in some cases the mother was very troubled. And in some cases the mother was absent. The mother wasn't around. And I think that comes from a place of, does the marketplace give opportunity to people regardless of gender And we had a discussion the other night at dinner about the fact that, and I think I brought this up the last time, about women having a difficult time negotiating. If you are working at a place and you've been there for over 6 months and you haven't asked for a raise, you need to you need to ask yourself, why not? And if that place is government oriented, I think, Carlos, I would love to hear your experience as a firefighter, because did you negotiate your raises? How does that work when you work for government? I've always been in the private sector. I don't know about you, Andy, but you've been in military and in firefighting, and I'm curious, how does one get a raise when they don't ask for it individually? Because in that individual, when I deal with negotiating contracts as a contractor of many, many people, I mean, it's a one-on-one, you're arm wrestling.
It's a different beast. A confession that I have is that whenever I got hired on, the department was actually in the shift of losing a bunch of seasoned veterans. And the chief then, who's the county mayor now, expressed that we were kind of in a good position to come in and take tests, and if we took those tests and scored high enough, we would make promotion. Of course, with promotion comes raises. So in 2 years, I was promoted to senior firefighter. In 4 years of my career, I was promoted to lieutenant. And then in less than 8 years of my career, I was promoted to captain, which is unheard of because the way the path was set forth before us, you had to have at least 7 years in to make lieutenant and around 15 years in to make captain. But because the vacancies were coming up and coming fast, they wanted to get basically butts in the seats to run the department. The fault in that is that I realize now, with 18 years in, that I didn't know enough. But my mindset back then was the department wasn't getting raises because raises were contingent on taxes being, or the budget, the upcoming budget for the city. Everything was contingent on that as far as us getting raises, the 3% and so on and so forth. And we had a step program that was in place that if you were in for so long, you got a raise this year, for so long, you got a raise that year. But whenever the budget came back around for the current year, there wouldn't be room in the budget for that raise to come. So the only way to get raises was to make promotion. So I made promotion. Like I said, the bad part about that was that now I realize that I didn't have enough knowledge of the position that I was going into. But my perception back then was I had kids to feed. And in order for me to get more money, I had to take tests to get more raises, you know. And it could have backfired in so many ways because now I realize the responsibility that I had back then and that I had taken on with those promotions, that there were people counting on me that didn't even know my name. So when that bell rung and I responded to these people's houses, I was expected to be able to perform up to a certain level. And thus far, I may not have attained that level of experience or training, but yet still I held the position because the mindset was taking the test to get more money, to get the raise.
That's fascinating. Because
So yeah, and you're saying, I mean, like, and makes sense. If there's a position, you know, a governmental level position,
Yeah,
it's got to be filled.
it's got to
Right,
be
it's
filled.
got to be filled.
So why not me?
Yeah, why not me?
Why not me?
Yeah.
Well, what's so relevant is watching you go through these tests that you had to do, and that was pretty amazing. I was really, really not only proud because you're my friend, but I was just really impressed at how disciplined you were. I don't have that discipline to take tests. I have a horrible time with tests, and in fact, when I went to UTC, I barely took a test, and my GPA reflected that, and so therefore, the only test I had ever felt like I needed to meet at UTC was the borderline for financial aid, so that I could still get my student loans. It was a 2.0.
Isn't there somewhere that studies show that people that just because someone doesn't test well or they don't have the grade point average that they're supposed to have in school, that they may be geniuses?
Oh, absolutely. There's all sorts of
And it's because they're
data out
bored
there
with
that-
school or because the information hadn't been made I guess, plain enough or present it to them to where they could learn it. Because you may learn in a different way. We met a guy yesterday that was dyslexic.
Yeah.
So you have to teach him in a different way. And just because the tests are standardized across the board and don't cater to these tests are set forth for this level of dyslexia or this person may have a reading disability or whatever, and so we have to set this test for them. It's pretty much standard.
You know, and it is a difficult one to answer if you're going to include testing in anything, because if you're going to ask for some sort of rote memorization, you know, like a multiple choice or type answer, then you're testing someone's ability to memorize.
Yes.
Like, does that make intelligence?
Do they understand
No.
what the materials, or are they just memorizing the information?
So then if you ask maybe a short answer, an essay type question, right, where you're looking for content of knowledge, then you're still being judged based on what the final grader assumes is right, right? There's no... So both are wrong, right? One is testing memorization, and the other one is skewed by whoever's reviewing.
And I think that's my so-called gift, is that I'm able to remember things. I was taking a state certification all at the same time taking a assessment for the promotion simultaneously, which was stressful, but it helped me out because the information that I was picking up for the state certification was relevant to the assessment. So it all kind of ran in together, but at the end it came out to be a separate test versus the promotion.
But let's be clear, your access in the fire department was promotionally based on your ability to regurgitate during a test and also have the availability for a certain hierarchy that exists within the fire department that leads to, I mean, certainly the top of the fire department is the fire chief, right?
Yes.
And he basically probably is more of a referee than anything, because he's going to make sure that policy and procedure.
Prior to this evolution of promotions, the position was an appointment.
Oh, it was an appointment.
It was an appointment. So
by whom? Who did the
by
appointment?
the fire chief, and well, thus far it's been he would go out and he would have a certain number of people that were captains, and he was asking a couple of questions or whatever, and if they answered those questions to what he thought was relevant, he picked that person. Or maybe just, hey, I want you to be a battalion chief. I was promoted, and I went through the very first official assessment for the Chattanooga Fire Department, which it was some regurgitation because you had to refer to the manuals that we use, but then a lot of it was knowledge and even your understanding of chain of command, which, me being prior military, gave me an up anyway.
Yeah, that sounds. I have no chain of command other than the successful deal.
That's a good thing for you.
It's been really good for me because as a woman, it's been a liberating thing when I walk out and can have a check in hand that's almost instant approval without having to do anything sexual for that.
Awesome.
And that for me was like, it was so important being the woman that I am because I just had been so good at sports. And that's why I think I feel so bad for these guys playing in the NCAA and primarily these 5 divisions, which is what I have honed in on in the last 3 or 4 years, is it's much easier to start a business if you already have money in the bank, which is called equity. It gives you more latitude for guess and test. It gives you more latitude for error and repair. And when you grow up poor and you have no equity, and then let's say the only equity you do have, which is a lot of people in this country, is access to the equity within your home, then you have to be pretty certain, especially if you have kids and a wife, or maybe you're a sole parent, there's no way that love for your child half the time or more is going to allow you the ability to take that risk with your home and go out and get an equity line and say, okay, if this doesn't work, if this solution that I've come up in the marketplace doesn't work, then we will lose our home.
You know, and I don't know how true it is or not, but supposedly that's how Coker got his start. His parents put the house up, and
Are you talking about Bob Corker or the
Coker, the tire company.
Oh, really?
Coker Tire, yes.
I don't know that guy. What's his name? Is he still alive?
His son is Corky. I think the dad just passed away last year sometime, but Corky Coker, I think is his name. He still runs around. Had a show on Discovery for a while where him and the son-in-law were going around buying cars. But
Yeah, very successful.
yes, very successful.
Very successful
What he does, or what the family does, is they make tires for antique cars and classic cars, and any company that would come up as competition, they would buy it out and destroy the molds. So,
Oh, wow.
So around the world, you can only get these tires to these particular vintage and classic and antique cars from Coker. But
Yeah,
the
that's
family
interesting.
sold their house or put their house up or whatever for money for him to start the company.
Well, maybe we should put Corky, what's his name?
Coker.
Coker.
Corky Coker on our list of invitees if somebody, because frankly, I think that's really what's interesting. I'll jump back into the conversation from before. We've introduced ourselves. We certainly jumped into a dialogue. I think ultimately what my focus has been for the last week is to make sure that what I said last week and what my feelings are about private taxation being called insurance in this country. I did do a little more research, and basically what I found was that obviously there was an act, a certain act, a law implemented in 1944 that gave states the ability to regulate and set laws based on insuring people and how to go out and sell that insurance. And one thing that's gotten tied into that is that states now collect over $10 billion in state revenue for the collection plate when it comes to the sale of insurance. So one would think that number, if looked at as a taxation number, needs some representation that is diversified. So what I did is I went into an organization, the NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Committee, and I basically pulled up all of the people who run the insurance boards in every state. And what I found is I couldn't find a black person in there.
Oh, my.
And then I couldn't find very many women. And I thought to myself, this is the greatest thing and gift in the world to me, because what I had thought existed was a layer of private taxation that no one feels tethered to. When we vote, we feel tethered to our money that goes to Washington. We feel like we have when we pay into a dole like Social Security that's supposed to come back around, one of the things that occurs is that you feel ownership in some way. Like what was it? They're saying that Donald Trump is still refusing to release his tax returns. And I've got a really substantial bet with my brother that he never will, because there was a guy in Houston when Ann Richards won the state of Texas for governorship, that in no doubt she won in a very, very southern macho state, because her premise was that guy that she ran against, that good old boy that could speak hillbilly better than anyone and certainly country strong better than anyone, had not paid tax. And he was out complaining about people taxing him to death and redistributing his sweat equity and his money. And he had not, when he released his tax return,
That's awesome.
he had not paid any taxes. And there is no doubt that Ann Richards, who is probably a political female hero of mine and certainly knew how to tell a joke, that was the biggest joke coming. She could ride that wave to the end of time with people who had been served with plastic spoons and not silver spoons.
Awesome.
And she could get those people with plastic spoons that had grown up with plastic spoons in their mouths to go out and vote for her on the premise that you cannot complain about government and over regulation and over if you actually are skirting the system by not paying into it. And I think that can be said for the insurance world. And all of these teachers trying to educate these poor kids and give them some equalizer when it comes to the understanding of what they can be in their life. Do not know that every time they pay an insurance bill with the small amount of money that they make, that is private redistribution of risk that some old white dude is determining where does that get invested. Because that's really what it is. When you look on this site of this private taxation, the vote is in the payment of the insurance, right? Because that truly, I lived without health insurance for almost 15 years because I was a private citizen going around selling home elevators and contracting a lot of my work regionally where I would go because I knew that marketplace existed. So I could hire a guy to fillet my fish and I could go in and I knew all the things that needed to be said because I was educated and knew why not to end a sentence in a preposition. I also got very good with pronouns, and I got very good with very quickly when someone would call, because the phone system people, similar to the internet people system, have figured out how to basically regionalize certain marketplaces. And so guarantee you that a person 50 years ago could basically tell you where they lived based on the 3 prefix. That's the most amazing thing. In Johnson City, where I'm from, 926 meant you lived on the south side of Johnson City. Do you know any prefixes anymore? Are you?
I remember when Chattanooga was 615.
So, but did you know any of because the microcosm, the microenvironment of phone numbers could place you, like Lookout Mountain. I guarantee people take my calls sometimes when I still call from home if they have caller ID because it's 825.
825, that's Lookout Mountain.
825, 821, 820 is Lookout, Georgia. Do you remember any of those numbers? You're younger than me, Andy, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I grew up in a really small town, so it was really one prefix, 309 for everything that was not Peoria, right? If you were in the little farming towns outside of Peoria, you were 309, right? If you were in Peoria, who knows? I didn't get to associate with those people.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, right? Is that you could isolate people by their number. It's like, wasn't it the Germans?
266, 265, 756. That was South Chattanooga. 629 was this area. 629, 624. Some parts of 698 was this area, and then Brainerd was 8 something. But when it come through, like I said, you knew it was Brainerd area. Yeah.
Here comes that memory.
It comes that memory.
Kicking them out.
Yeah. So imagine if I told you that the first $1 million that I ever sold was because that I knew the prefix of the Charleston, South Carolina area, and I knew the prefix determined whether the caller ID person would pick up the phone and let me talk to them. So imagine if I told you that at 23 years old, I knew that, and the reason I knew that is because my uncle owned a Yellow Page advertising company outside of Washington, D.C. in Bethesda, Maryland, and he taught me how to equalize through the phone service the locality of where you were doing business so that if you didn't have the knowledge of who to do business with in that community that you decided, because it was so small, that if you could start to massage your vernacular, I think some black entertainers call it speaking white when they're in a meeting and they start to basically turn their vernacular and their prose into a different, that if you could do that with a phone number. So when I was 24 24 and really on into 25 and discovered home elevators was going to be my niche, and did my research on the home elevator companies that were out there, and there weren't very many at the time. I could pick that 3-digit prefix with that knowledge, and therefore knowing that when caller ID came, that person would pick up because they thought it was someone they knew. And so that gave me the ability to be the best cold caller in America from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I would cold call someone from Chattanooga with the ability to basically have them not know who I was, because there was something that I could buy in the phone, within the phone system, that was called remote call forwarding. So when I would star 67 my number and leave a message, which also is what the phone company did. If you ever had a girlfriend or boyfriend you didn't know, you can still do that on your cell phone, by the way.
I don't want to know.
If you want to block your number. So I would cold call these contractors, and I would leave a message, and I usually knew how to do it, which was, hey, this is Michele calling. You've got a house on Isle of Palms that needs an elevator, it looks like, and I have a house going down the street from you, which I did not. And here's my phone number, 881-2991. And I knew not to give the area code, because behaviorally that would put me as I was out of town. Mm-hmm. And I also knew that the 881 was Mount Pleasant and Isle of Palms, and it would regionalize my call, and then they could make a phone call locally that it was 70 degrees down on that island, and it was snowing here in Chattanooga. I also knew that when the call came in, it was from that guy, and I would be like, hey, this is Michele, and the guy would be like, hey, look, yeah, I'm really looking for a call. I knew that I didn't have a child at home at that time that I had to look after, and he'd be like, where are you? And I'd be like, oh, I'm just grabbing a cup of coffee. You want to see something that I've got? And he's like, yeah, and we'd love to get a price from you. And I knew what not to say very quickly in that call that would distinguish me regionally, that I was someone he couldn't trust because I was an immigrant. I was a Tennessee immigrant at that point. And so essentially, he trusted me and would say, come see me. And I would drive. I'd leave my house after dinner, and I'd drive all night, and I'd be there at 8 a.m. And I never once told him that I was from Tennessee, nor did he ask. It was an assumption made. So that's what those kids are trying to do at Brainerd. They're trying to equalize through what they put on their back with the people outside of their small little pond. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to put Ralph Lauren and become part of the Ralph Lauren gang. And they're trying to put Dior in some way to bring value to themselves. But the fact is, the joke is on them.
Raise themselves up.
Because if they created something here at Archway and then went to a local business that would allow them to sell whatever we can come up with here, and ultimately the natural people to do this are people who are already selling something. And if the only access to sell something in this community is drugs, which is very, bold of me to say, to assume, but I don't know that anybody is printing newspapers for kids to sell over here. I don't know that anybody is selling M&Ms or
T-shirts. There's a guy down the end of the road right there at the intersection of Dotson and Glass that sells socks. So there are some that, and even a guy right around the corner across from the fire hall that sells used tires. So there are some entrepreneurial, businesses going, and they're doing something they may not have a license, they may not pay taxes on the socks that they sell or the tires that they sell, but they've stepped outside of the so-called drug game to be more of a business owner and not an employee.
But I guess what I'm trying to say, Carlos, is if there's a guy at Brainerd right now or a girl, and I really want to keep this gender neutral because I feel like what's wrong with female sports is just the lack of equity as well. They aren't spending marketing dollars to talk about it, to keep it on your mind. We're not. What I'm saying is that if we could take a kid that could run and do great things, like Von Bell, like let's take this kid for example. He just rented my house. He wanted to celebrate at $1 million house, so he rented my house. Right?
Von Bell, I'm not familiar.
There's this kid, Von Bell. He evidently went to Ridgeland.
Okay.
And he just got drafted in either the first or the very top end of the second round.
Really? Okay, good deal.
Of the NFL, right?
Okay.
So he calls my sister to book my house in the North Shore that I rent out to people as a business. I collect taxes. I do everything I'm supposed to do. And that house is, I don't know, $700 a night to rent. And it's certainly $1 million house. And let's take that guy. When I saw what he held up that night after he got drafted was a Papa John's pizza box. Right?
I don't really watch sports.
I know, I
I'm
forget
ashamed
that you
to admit
don't.
that, but I am willing, and as sexist as this may sound, I am willing to go to an LFL game. But that's a whole other story. But he held up a Papa John's box, which means that he's probably going to have some kind of sponsorship from Papa John's as a representative.
What it basically means is Von Bell thinks that he has a shot at being paid by Papa John's to represent, or being sponsored by Papa John's.
Yeah.
Some sort of endorsement. Versus if he met a guy like, or a gal like me, and a guy like you, and a guy like Andy and Devin certainly, and we sat here and said, the premise in most marketplaces is that you are being fooled by this carrot, that you're ever going to get there. And so most people like me who have been successful with very little equity, I mean almost none, other than my ability to understand human nature and understand when I get in front of someone that I can always be secondary to their thought process, especially, I tell people all the time, if you want to sell something, the most important thing in sales is to shut up and listen, because people naturally always want to talk about themselves. When you go, I've sold over $50 million worth of home elevators, and when you go in and you are in a one-on-one scenario and you begin to talk about yourself, you've lost that sale immediately.
I'd agree with that.
Fascinating, yeah.
And so I had the ability, and still do, most of the time when I sit down with someone who is looking for something from me, to have them tell me what they are looking for. And then I try to solve their problem, whether that be as inexpensively as I can, as fashionably as I can, because some people want really fashionable elevators. I mean, I once quoted an elevator that was $180,000. I didn't get it. Well, I'll tell you another story. There's a guy up in Cleveland, Alan Jones, I think is his name. They asked me, he made his money in checking to cash, which I fundamentally have a problem with. I don't know the guy. I hear negative things about the way he made his money. And certainly I still try to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, and I'm always trying to say that to people without being, I don't belong to a church. I don't tithe to churches because I think structurally sometimes they have issues and they get upside down in the hierarchy of things. But what I'm trying to get at is, if we could take that Von Bell guy and have him do something for a pizza place locally that is owned or being operated in such a way that is a more reflection of what he believes in, then just maybe that he does something for that local business person by the sheer volume of people watching his athletic ability.
And that may be I know it is part of the reason why I don't get into sports, because I think it's just too commercialized now. It's all about the dollar. When I was growing up, your Magic Johnsons, your Wilt Chamberlains, your Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's, these guys play for the love of the game. Yeah, Isaiah Thomas's, they play for the love of the game. And although they may have had flashy lifestyles off camera, you really didn't see them like making it rain in the club. You really didn't see them with the 12 gold chains on and stuff like that. They were genuine guys, guys that I guess you could, in my perception of them as a child, guys that you could walk up to and speak to, but they played basketball. And they played until they hurt and cried on each other's backs. To where these guys now play for the dollar. It's all about how much I can make, how much I can show you that I have in my pocket, and how much more they can get on top of that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's driven me away from big money sports as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the funny thing about that too is that they didn't know any better. I think most people who get poor or who are poor don't understand the valuation of equity, especially when they're doing everything they can to dig themselves out of the generational hole that they were placed in. And so to me, the forgiveness comes with the individual, but not with the overall system. And when you look at a system, and certainly if you look at the NFL night right now, it might surprise you, but their target audience is women, single women, between the age of 25 and 45. That is the largest growth area that the NFL has right now because of the paradigm shift that has happened when it comes to people sitting at home and not actually spending their money in an experience. When it comes to the NFL, there's more access to someone who enjoys the game versus a social outing. And when you go to the Braves, it's a social outing. When you go to see the Tennessee Titans, it's a social outing. It might as well be a club that is named in such a way because so many people are going to that, and it might as well be a singles club because a lot of their target audience now is driven around tailgating and getting there early and placing that emphasis on the fact that they can bring their own food and beer and wine and look at what they do from that perspective to create that density to then be able to sell them stuff while they're in that arena. Having said that, that too is why I feel like there's an element of hypocrisy within small business and Republicans who want to yell that there should be access and people should have the movability. My biggest phrase has always been that I would much rather be a small fish in a big pond than a big fish in a small pond, because the reality is I can be quicker, I can make quicker decisions, I can be more agile in that pond, and I can get away from my mistakes quicker, and I can move around. And it has been proven time and time again.
And you don't have anyone trying to hook you.
And I don't have anyone. I want to
Especially
be.
if you're a big fish.
I want to be just big enough as that minnow that I'm not bait.
I want to be the fish. Well, not really, but I think the fish that hangs under the shark's fin. That's the easiest job in life because the shark does all the work, does all the hunting, and that's basically what you're explaining with big business taking advantage of the people around here. We're the sharks. We're the ones out there hunting. We're killing. We're doing this. We're doing that. And the fish just kind of hangs under the armpit and just reaps all the benefits.
Yeah, but when's the last time you heard a teacher, and without segmenting and isolating anyone, ask, where does that money go when I pay into it every month? If I get paid on the 1st and the 15th, if I'm a teacher, right, and I get insurance, which is private taxation, because we've already proven that $10.4 billion is circulated to states via state regulation of insurance. And I will have the numbers the next time that talk about Tennessee more specifically.
Okay.
But if $880 million in the United States goes to regulate these insurances, so that's split up too, then the $9.6 billion left over that's collected goes into the general fund of that state or those states. And if that money then is segmented here or there, and the largest pools of people that is being pulled from is car insurance, health insurance, and all the things established within that, I believe that if it's mandated by the state or the federal government that you must carry car insurance or health insurance, then that should immediately be not collected from you in your day-to-day activities. So you as a fireman, I don't know when you get paid, but let's just say you get paid on the 15th. Your percentage that you would pay into your income tax would be lower based on the fact that I would treat insurance as a private taxation, and so I wouldn't double tax you at that point, or more importantly, keep your money until the next year when you can file your form to get your money back.
Which is all dependent on how many dependents and all that stuff that I claim.
Yeah, so it's this whole thing of contrived artificial constructs to basically give these and float these people this money and see what they can do with it to make things better, or go out and give these tax incentives to these bigger businesses that can build density. But how much would it really surprise you to find out that based on Tennessee being a sales tax state much more than a income-based state, so transactionally, they can get money from everybody if indeed the marketplace is working in such a way where guys aren't going down to the end of the street and buying from a guy selling socks from God only knows where and not collecting sales tax.
Hosiery dumpster.
Hosiery dumpster. Maybe he went to a hosiery dumpster and got that stuff and then came over and sold it, and there was no transactional tax during that transaction of someone stopping by. But one would argue that may be why people don't pay a lot of attention to neighborhoods like this, because the people who are in business may be going around that business for them, and it's hard to keep up with those guys. Down the street from where we are right now, I was really surprised to walk into a grocery store that didn't have any groceries.
Really?
It didn't take me a second to realize that there was some other transaction happening here.
And that used to be a thriving grocery store. When I was a kid, my mom would send me to that store to get odds and ends, but it was a full-fledged grocery store. It's closed down now, but the last time that I was in there, it about grossed me out because they had hair products in the same aisle as the meat. And the freezers, instead of sitting up against the wall, sat in the middle of the floor where you could see the actual back where they loaded the stuff at. It was like just, it's crazy.
Well, and I think that can be said for the transactional tax that could be then negotiated on, because one of the things that's relevant here that one of the people that spoke last night about public education is there seems to be some disconnect in the business community to give value to education. And I said back to her, that's because there's not a marketing plan given to those businesses to understand. Those businesses have, just like the NCAA, have started just treating people like cattle because the technology has helped them be more productive, but it's already been proven time and time again that technology is constantly evolving into something else, and therefore if you educate people to begin to want to learn how to learn, we've lost that concept in our school systems because they've been monetized as well. And so once you teach someone how to learn, then their world is their oyster. And I learned how to learn very quickly in life.
Which doesn't happen via regurgitating info on a test.
It doesn't.
No, no.
It happens
So
with
right there's the start of the problem.
What's the thing? What's your best phrase? Yeah, it typically happens with tests and tests. Failure is your best equalizer when it comes to all things being equal, because if someone is driven to succeed through access, but if you basically get to a place in life where you watch these kids and then you look at the percentage of them that actually graduate and go on, because we can assume most of these kids that go to these big time universities, over 51% of them return back to their, well, I'll give you a statistic, 74% of people, or 67, I think it's 70 plus percent of all NFL athletes within 10 years claim bankruptcy.
Well,
They clearly don't understand what, like we had said earlier, right? They're focused on the money. They don't understand the big game.
Exactly. But going back even further, we spoke before on it was saying, or some study that you saw that said that from 0 to 3rd grade, you learn to read.
Oh yeah, Jeffrey
and then
Canada,
from
yeah.
3rd on, you read to learn. And if something happens on the early part of that process to where you don't learn to read, or you learn to read later, then you're that far behind the game.
Yeah, I mean, you basically from kindergarten or from pre-K to 3rd grade, you're learning to read. From 4th grade on, you're reading to learn. And if you don't know how to read, and I have a hard time reading even still today.
Well, supposedly that diagram is what the studies have said to be shown to put private industries that build jails. The sales are built upon those studies.
Oh, really?
Supposedly, yes. I don't know if
That'd be
it's fact or not.
fascinating. It'd be interesting to have as we expand this over the years, just frankly speaking, because we're not here to quit, and we're certainly going to invite some people to come educate us. But I think what we're after here, the cause is, and the effect is just get people to understand that there's opportunity in East Chattanooga.
Yes.
And I certainly am a proven testament to if you take a risk. The largest amount of money I ever made in my life was made because I built a house that shouldn't have been built right after the recession. And I had access to some money that came to me via a negotiated deal. And so if you take people's power to negotiate, and that's what I'm saying, if someone is out there listening and they've been working for a law firm or an accounting firm or an insurance firm, I'm not going to say I'm not talking to the white dude, but there is a part of me that I'm just subversive enough really to only talk to women, and certainly black women as well. My mission in life, whenever I get around and talk to people, is for them to have the gumption to stand up and go try that form of negotiation and be willing to accept the dismissive attitude that you may get, because what they don't know is once someone dismisses you, in so many cases that fuels your fire to go around that person. Mm-hmm. But if you don't take or attempt or make the attempt to go get yourself more money, which could be the better part of your life for your child or your mother or anyone else that you're taking care of, because most people take care of something. Mm-hmm. Most people don't want to be alone. And ultimately, for me, that is like the most awesome test of frankly speaking is, do we get, when we go to a forum base, does someone stand up and say, God, I heard you talking and cheerleading me to get up, and I actually went and got up, and what if my goal is not that they actually get the raise? What if my goal is they don't get the raise, and then they get dismissed, and then they really find that fire in their belly that says, I've been wanting to do this, and I'm going to leave here? Because you really do not know where you stand with someone until you tell them no. And the no can be found by taking the risk and not getting what you want. I don't want to tell someone to stand up and go try to get a raise, because that's just one element of this. Mm-hmm. If they don't get that raise or they don't get the acknowledgement they're looking for, find the strength to go do something else. Because as the marketplace is expanding, there's lots of opportunities out there for them, certainly in Chattanooga.
Find the tools, find the support system, like going round and about back, thinking that guess and test model, like trying to teach people, again, how to learn. Mm-hmm. We also have to give them the background context that says, just because something fails, you can have groundwork laid where it doesn't mean complete explosion of your life, right? Like the putting up the equity of your house situation, right? There's so many methods to take risks that doesn't end in one wrong decision ruining everything.
It's not over, yeah. As a matter of fact,
right.
In some cases, it's just the beginning.
That's the trial and error, guess and test model. Mm-hmm. We've got to take those challenges and help guide that say, hey, let's make some smart decisions, let's try new things. But in the end, look, you've got these paths built in to safety net yourself.
Exactly.
Well, and I think we've got another probably hour and 20 minutes. We're trying to get this under an hour, this archway thing. But I think where we are with this today, and let's tell the date. What's today? June the...
Wednesday.
June the 15th, 2016. So if you're out there listening and you're interested, we will be announcing the Archway. I'm having lunch with Till tomorrow to fund the Archway donut for the summer.
Okay.
I'm meeting with Barbara Cox at Cox Bakery on Broad Street on Friday to finalize the baking of that donut.
The arch nut.
And then once we start putting this together, the one thing we want to be clear is if you're dealing drugs right now and you can't buy any insurance other than belonging to a gang, you probably should come see us.
Yes.
Because the
Without the
reality,
drugs.
without the drugs, or because the reality is we're some people that aren't going to judge you, or if you have been in a gang environment and you're female and the self-worth that you've gotten, we will welcome you to come in 2523 Glass Street when we announce the donut contest and let you watch and participate in something that may or may not bring you the awareness that there are other things that you can find out there as long as you're willing to stand up and walk across the street.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you're listening and have listened to some of our other shows, again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Yes.
Subscribe to our iTunes, frankly speaking, and give us a like on Facebook also.
Yeah, because we're getting likes from all over the country right now because I posted a funny picture of Donald Trump, and so all these women are liking it. It's kind of funny. I've had 500 likes in the last 24 hours from
Look at you.
all across the country. Isn't that fascinating? It's,
Awesome.
It'll be interesting to see. You know, he's a very polarizing guy, so maybe he can be the shark and I can be the little fish swimming beside him. You know,
Use him, yes. Use him.
Let's use him as
There's no
much
telling
as
how
possible.
There's no telling how many times he was that little fish up under somebody's fin and made $1 million.
He's the epitome of shark, right? According to him, right? But nobody's seen his tax returns, and really, you can't go around and talk about how much money you have until you've paid tax on that money.
Ask Wesley Snipes.
It doesn't matter what you do in this country. You have to pay tax if you're going to go out, especially if you're going to go out and brag about how much money you have.
Leona Hemsley.
Can't wait to see it.
It's just me fun as all get out when he gets this. We're going to have a whole session on his tax returns. But I lose the bet with my brother if he does do his tax returns because he's convinced he will and I'm convinced he won't.
It's surprising that it's taken this long to get anything from him concerning that. Remembering back how driven he was on the current president's birth certificate. And how he was just driven on, where's his birth certificate? Where's his birth certificate? And now where's his tax return? He's like, none of your business. I'll put it out when I'm ready to put it out.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Back off me.
Deflection and redistribute. You know, the funny thing about Donald Trump, too, that's interesting to me is that he knows what to do. So if you've listened to this show and you've listened to me drop millions upon billions of dollars in numbers, and you're just basically listening to a snippet of it, and you're convinced that Michele Peterson is a wealthy, like, call me and I'll loan you a gazillion dollars. That's the funny thing about it is if you half listen or only listen to a quarter, he can put anything out there and it goes in bold print in people's minds and they don't ask. They don't seem to care to see his tax return.
Because
They believe.
the society we live in now subscribes to drama. And as long as he can maintain that level of reality TV drama,
Yeah.
he's got a pretty
Well, it's
decent
just
following.
like our the NFL players, right? You see them, they must have money. He's on TV, he's got to have money,
Must be rich, yes. Yes.
and
Perception.
certainly has money. But the question is, how much does he actually claim he has?
You know what's so
Exactly.
funny is that you just reminded me of something. I know Devin's waving. We got to wrap up because we tried to keep it under an hour. But Mr. DJ, but you know, I put an elevator in for a guy in the 90s. His name was Steve Wallace. He played for the San Francisco 49, big guy. And what was fascinating about this guy is he had no, my grandmother always said an ounce of pretentious is worth a pound of manure. And he had no pretentiousness to him. And he came through a home show shuffling his feet, big dude. And he had his sweats on, and but no fancy sweats. Looks like he actually hadn't washed his sweats in a while. Really nice looking, huggable bear guy, but definitely didn't look like what you think of as an NFL player. And he shuffles up to my booth and he's like, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "You sell elevators?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And he goes, "Well, come see me tomorrow." And he hands me this card that has his number on it, which, according to most people, I would have known where he lived, which I did because I knew the prefix was Buckhead. That 3-digit prefix gave it away. I knew I was dealing with a real buyer, but the guys next to me in the elevator business must not have known the prefix thing or didn't put any emphasis on it, so they dismissed his card. So he told me that I was the only person that showed up at his house, and it was a 26,000 square foot house off of West Conway Drive. What's going to be fascinating is if I ever see this guy again, because I know that house is now sold 3 or 4 times. I've watched it over the years because I really like this guy. He was but he went on ESPN and talked about all the things that happened to him. Well, certainly since I met him, it's been 15 years. That was 97. It's been 20 years. So I'm going to try to find this guy. Maybe I'll promote this somewhere in Atlanta and somebody knows Steve Wallace, played for the 49ers. Maybe he'll come see us and tell us what it was like. Because I think that...
It'd be great to get him on the show.
Yes.
I think the thing is, until people really tell their story, and the real truth of it is it's very difficult to go from 0 to 40. It's pretty easy in this country to go, 0 to 5. But if something happens in the interim, like your transmission breaks or you're on some borrowed, gas or something, it's not going to last very long. And so I think that's the thing is we talk about these drug dealers so much, and I spend so much time talking about trying to get some of the younger guys or girls that are attempting this business, if I can persuade them in some way to understand that they can take that same energy and apply it if given the right markets to look for and have the ability to understand there's just a certain expectation of decorum that they have to do to be able to enter that, then they could come back out of it with way more success than going to the NCAA or going into the NFL or the NBA. Because if James Chapman would have started speaking earlier and maybe hadn't spent so much, my goal with him was to hear his story of how much time he spent trying to get into the NBA and how much time he may have wasted because he's a talented dude. And so I think that's it. That's the show today, Archway.